Okay, hello everybody, and welcome back to this next episode where we're going to start looking into or digging into WordPress more. So in this episode we'll be looking at the settings and how to get WordPress set up so we more or less are doing it the right ways to optimize it the best. So what you can see right now is I have the front page of WordPress. This is a default installation. So this is typically what comes up when you first install WordPress. Nothing fancy. And admittedly, before this video I actually reset an installation of WordPress, so it seems a few things may have gone wrong, but we'll get to that shortly. So let's just assume that this does work and that we're going to change the settings so that we get more of a better user experience out of it. The first place I want you to go is to the settings file, and we'll go through them one by one. So let's go to General first. When you set up WordPress with your cPanel installation, you should already have the tagline and site name. In fact, in some installations you might have to actually rename your own tagline, but not all WordPress themes use a tagline. So typically this section, the most important thing on this section is the time zone, because if your time zone is not set properly, then when you schedule a post, it'll be scheduled in UTC +0. For me, living in Brisbane, Australia, I would be UTC +10, so I can either tick UTC +10 in the select box, just click on it, or I can go by my country, which is Australia, and I can find Brisbane. And that's the first step to your WordPress, getting your WordPress started to adhere to standards. Alright, so next we'll go to writing. And I'll give you a little hint. XML RPC is a ping-in request. It means when you write a post, it'll ping Ping-O-Matic and tell it you've updated your post, or you've created a new post for that matter, and they'll start helping you index it in search engines, or rather index it in their own personal search engines, which can help with traffic. Can help, but doesn't necessarily mean it will. You can also add more than just this one here, which is not most people don't do this. And maybe if you're heavy on blogging, you might consider doing this, particularly for a niche site. So if you view this link here, you'll see the services all here, and you can actually read through this page, and if you want you can actually just copy this Ping-O-Matic, it's already duplicated, and you can just paste in here. So we save that, and then we have our list of places to ping when we do a post. So other than that, there's not really anything you need to do in this section. So we're going to move on to the reading section. We'll come back to this front page display once we have our pages set up, but for this point in time you don't need to do anything for the reading section, not until you have the pages set up. However, if you're working on a development site and you're creating a site for a client, and I'm assuming most of you are just end users, that means you're creating the site for yourself. But if you were creating it for a client, I'd encourage you to discourage search engines and re-enable it once you deploy the site. That's way Google will not be indexing your development site. But since this site we're assuming is live, we'll leave that. And finally, well, not finally, but just before we get to permalinks, I want to look at discussion, because this is often overlooked. WordPress can be resource intensive, and some of the better ways to stop A, resource intensivity, and B, spam, is to disable the blog from notifying other blogs, so we're not getting pingbacks and trackbacks. So these first two should be disabled, or it's up to you, but they can cause both security risks and performance inhibiting. So I'd highly recommend you disable them, because most links back to your site are spam anyway that come from a trackback. And just one more tip on this area here. This is probably the most underused area people have on WordPress, but it can be very powerful. In fact, in the resource notes I'll give you a link to a very powerful set of blacklist items you can actually add to here, so that the spam won't go to your email. Instead, it'll be automatically put into the spam box. So let me just explain that a little bit. Let's say you have a site in English and somebody spamming from maybe Japan puts all these Japanese characters into your box and into your comment. Now obviously you know that's spam because they didn't read it. If they did, they would not be commenting in Japanese or kanji or whatever. So you might actually put the kanji characters in here to say that if any of these characters are used, automatically push that comment into the spam folder. And there's actually a resource to do that, so we'll show you that later. It can also save Askamet or Kismet, however you pronounce it. It can also save that little piece a lot of time because it doesn't have to then send that package to WordPress's servers to validate that it is spam. So let's move on. Finally, the last section is permalinks. The default is to use an ugly piece of code that looks like this. We want to just typically go for post name. I in the past have gone for numeric. I've just removed the archives. The problem with that is that if you change your blog over, and let's just say you have to reinstall WordPress altogether, then your posts are indexed by the post ID, and if the post ID changes because you create a new blog and just re-import the post maybe, there is a chance you will lose the post ID and lose your search engine ranking. So while it does have performance impact to have the post ID and the post name, and it also allows you to just add the post ID in and it takes you directly to the post name, I just recommend sticking to post name on its own. So we'll save that. Let's go to the front and let's just refresh. You'll notice now down the left hand side it says hello world. If we click on that, we'll see there's a pretty link here saying hello world. So that concludes setting up WordPress and the reasons why we want to do what we're doing. And just on the note, I might have confused you earlier when I talked about post ID, but with the site I originally had, I could actually type 34, and if my post ID was 34, it would redirect me to 34/hello world. And that was one thing I loved, but the aesthetics of having a post ID look like this in the search engines is probably not so ideal. Not damaging, but not ideal. So let's leave the lesson there, and we'll come back next time and we'll look at the quintessential pages that we should add on a niche site. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.